All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Cybersecurity doesn't have to be scary, protecting your growing business. My name is Kate McEwen, and I'll be introducing today's presentation from Rea Information Services. As we wrap up October, which is Cybersecurity Awareness Month 2025, this webinar couldn't be more timely. This session has been designed specifically for business leaders who want to optimize their IT infrastructure, strengthen their cybersecurity, and maximize their technology investments, all while staying within budget. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please enter them into the chat box on your screen. We'll address as many questions as possible during the Q&A session at the end. And to be respectful of everyone's time, we may not be able to answer every question live. So following today's webinar, our team will review all submitted questions and send out comprehensive answers with our follow-up email on Wednesday. Additionally, this webinar is eligible for 1 CPE credit, and we'll be sending you both the presentation slides and a recording of today's session in the follow-up email. Next slide, please. Go ahead and scan that now. All righty. I'm excited to introduce today's presenters, Jeff Rapp and Travis Strong and Steve Grossbaugh from our Rea Information Services team. Jeff is a principal with Rea and the director of Rea Information Services. Jeff has been helping organizations manage and secure their information technology for 30 years. Travis Strong is a principal with Rea Information Services. Travis's near 20-year career has focused on IT risk management and cybersecurity for organizations across multiple industries. Steve Grossbaugh is the Business Development Manager for Rea Information Services with over 20 years of experience in IT solutions, managed services, and cybersecurity. Steve specializes in helping businesses identify technology opportunities. Jeff, Travis, and Steve, thank you for being here today. Go ahead and dive in.
Awesome, thanks, Kate. Moving into the agenda here today, just want to welcome everyone. Obviously, thank you for joining us today. But today we're going to take a journey through the landscape of cybersecurity, and here's kind of our roadmap for today's adventure that will hopefully help you thrive in this digital world that we operate in today. So from just a setting the stage standpoint, we want to talk about kind of what's happening on Elm Street. We'll kick things off by looking at what's really happening out there in the cyber world. I'll talk about some of the headlines, talk about why cybersecurity is no longer just an IT issue, and uncover the most common threats lurking in the shadows, targeting organizations just like all of ours. And then after this, after we see the threats, we're going to shine a flashlight on them. We'll walk through real-world cyber attack examples and show you some of the minimum essential protections that every organization needs. You can think of this section as your starter toolkit for defending against the goblins and the ghosts and everything in between. From there, next, we're going to talk and confront the compliance lions and tigers and bears, whether it's HIPAA, CMMC, FTC, PCI, SOC, whatever it is. Compliance doesn't have to be terrifying, and I'll show you how to make sense of the alphabet soup and align your security programs so compliance becomes a natural outcome and not a painful obligation. From there, we're going to actually dive into what I'm calling the web of protection. It's layered and scalable cybersecurity. This is where we'll reveal your cheat code, which is defense in depth. We'll walk through how to build layered security across your ecosystem to truly protect our organizations as they grow. And if you're wondering what does cyber maturity actually look like, this is where it all should come together and it all should click for you. And after that, we're going to dive into some organizational strategy on how to escape the IT and cybersecurity nightmare. We'll talk about the strategy, not tools, not tactics, but let's just put it all together. We're going to answer the questions many organizational leaders are asking, like, where do I start? What should I prioritize? How do I build a culture where security is part of our operations and not an obstacle to it? This is really where, we kind of turn that chaos into clarity, okay? So that's kind of our agenda for today. Hopefully that's the reason why you showed up today, is to learn about these topics, but let's dive right into it. And we're gonna get started with our first poll. We actually have 3 polls spread throughout this presentation. I'm gonna hand it over to Steve, and he's gonna walk us through the first poll here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're so happy to have you. Thank you, Travis. We'll have, as Travis mentioned, we'll have a few polls throughout just for a little audience participation. So kicking it off, if your business was in a horror movie, what would be the biggest cyber villain? Go ahead and select one. Now, these are anonymous, and if you don't see yours, feel free to add it in the chat, but insider risk, ransomware, data breach, reputational damage from an attack, lack of preparedness or response planning, or something else, not sure where to start. We'll take a minute, and then we'll just go ahead and take a look at the results to see what you guys are thinking. Okay, let's take a look at those results.
Ransomware data breach.
Pretty timely, pretty typical. Ransomware or data breach. Lack of preparedness. I think we're really going to help you guys learn quite a bit about those two top responses.
Yeah, we couldn't, we were limited. We could only put 5 items on that list, but I wanted to put like an all the above or something like that, or some other items on that list, but we were limited on the slide there. Yeah, like Steve said, hopefully the rest of this presentation will kind of yield some benefits for you guys, and maybe give you some insight on how to attack and go after some of these issues, so that they're not the cyber villains you're afraid of. And I think we've got, is this another code here, Kaylin, for CPE? Or Kate?
Yes,
Okay.
if they didn't get a chance to scan it.
All right. All right, so let's dive in. Let's talk about what's happening on Elm Street. So I want to really set this up. So what's really kind of happening out there, because the threats we're facing today, they're not fictional monsters, right? They're real, they're growing, and they're targeting, you know, organizations just like ours. And if you go to that next slide, let's talk about some of the realities of the situation here. So number one, you know, cyber risk isn't just an IT issue. It's no longer something you just hand off to IT to handle. It affects every department, from finance to HR to operations to leadership. Cyber risk is a business risk, and a cyber incident doesn't just shut down computers. You know, it can halt revenue, disrupt production, damage reputation. It can trigger legal and regulatory consequences and all sorts of stuff. Number two, it doesn't have to be intimidating, right? The goal of today, like the webinar title is, if I remember right, the webinar title is Cybersecurity Doesn't Have to Be Scary. So the goal of today is not to scare you. The goal of today is actually to empower you, to empower all of us. And yes, the threats are real, but cybersecurity, it's not an unsolvable mystery. There's a manageable path forward. You don't need to be a cybersecurity expert. You just need the right structure and the right strategy in place. And that's hopefully what we can help you with a little bit in this 1 hour that we have in this webinar. You know, the third thing I point out here is threats are growing. We're not imagining it. Attacks, they're increasing every year. Whether ransomware, like we just did that poll, right? Ransomware, phishing, data theft, they're at an all-time high. And this data point, I'm gonna probably talk about it until I'm blue in the face, but cybercrime is projected, I don't know if you know this, but cybercrime is projected to cost the world over $10 trillion. And I saw a statistic recently too, and I think it was from Bloomberg. If cybercrime were a country, its economy would rank as the 3rd largest in the world, behind the United States and China. 3rd in line would be cybercrime. That just blows my mind. And then number 4, so, you know, a lot of the attacks that are happening out there, they're opportunistic attacks. Most attacks aren't targeted. They're automated. You know, oftentimes attackers, they don't even know your name, or they don't even know who you're going after. They're scanning the internet for anyone with a weak password, or, you know, looking for an open port or a vulnerable system or an unpatched system that's out there on the internet. If you're vulnerable, quite honestly, you could be a target, or you are a target. So that's kind of the world we live in today, with attacks being opportunistic. And cybercrime is more automated and more organized today than it's ever been. You know, if you know anything about this space in this world, it used to be, right, you'd be nervous about, you know, the guy hanging out in his basement attacking people and organizations, but it's not like that anymore. Many of these cybercrime, it's organized crime today is basically what it is. Many of these are global criminal organizations using artificial intelligence, using automation, and they've got, I laugh about it, but it's concerning. But at the same time, I'm going to kind of bring humor to it a little bit. A lot of these organizations have, you know, 24/7 call centers. They're 24/7 organizations that are launching attacks, but yet they're available to help you, you know, respond to one of their incidents in your environment. Quite honestly, cybercrime has become industrialized, which is an odd thing to think about. But that's the state of the world that we're in today. And then the next point is really, you know, I get questions, you know, often about what are the cyber threats that are targeting our industry, or what are the things for our industry that we need to be concerned with? Yes, there are some unique threats towards some industries, but really no industry ultimately is immune to the threats. Healthcare, manufacturing, nonprofits, accounting firms, law firms, if your organization uses email, stores data, operates with technology, you're in the game whether you want to be or not. That's just the nature of the beast right now. And then the last point here is small, mid-sized, medium-sized organizations are prime targets. Here's the twist. Cyber criminals are now going after small and mid-sized organizations more than the large enterprises. Why? It's because the small, medium-sized organizations, oftentimes they don't have the same protection. They don't have dedicated security teams. They may lack budget. They may lack investment. The list goes on. We're easier to breach, and sometimes we're faster to pay. So that's kind of the goal there. So yeah, the world we're living in. It is the world we're living in. You don't have to be afraid of it though. Once you understand the threats, you can control them, right? We can't control what we don't know, or we can't, you know, attack something or, you know, prevent something from happening if we don't know what it is. But that's exactly what we're going to talk about through the remaining time we have today here. Let's go to the next slide. I want to share just some statistics and some numbers that I pulled together just beyond that $10 trillion. So if you kind of build this out, want to make sure everybody knows that Allianz, you know, one of the global insurance and financial companies out there, they highlight cyber as one of the most important business risks in today's world. I already talked about that $10 trillion global cost of cybercrime. From Verizon's recent data breach investigations report, 61% of small and mid-sized organizations experienced an attack in the past year. Thought that was an important statistic for everybody to understand. 95% of data breaches were tied to human error. That's from the World Economic Forum. We're going to touch on some of these in a little bit more detail here in a second too. 70% of organizations that suffered a ransomware attack were small to mid-size, and that's from Coveware. That company Coveware, they spent a lot of time in negotiating ransom payments with bad actors. So I think they have a little bit of data and intel on what they're talking about. And then 43% of cyber attacks target small organizations. 14% are prepared to defend, and that's from Accenture. So some pretty enlightening statistics there, again, but not to provide scare tactics or anything. It's just to give you some data points about what we're looking at. So let's go into the threat landscape here. On this next slide, I'm going to walk through a handful of threats that are out there, starting with the first one. So I want to talk through what are the most common threats lurking in the shadows that are targeting organizations just like all of ours. Number one is phishing and social engineering and artificial intelligence. It is the master of disguise. It's still the number one way that attackers get in today. It's not through hacking a firewall, it's through hacking the person. It's through taking advantage of the person. That's what this is all about, right? How can we trip up the human? How can I trick Travis into doing something he otherwise wouldn't do? Phishing emails, fake login pages, text messages. We all get the text messages, right? We didn't pay our toll bill or whatever the text message is of the day, but AI generated emails and voice calls, they're all being used to try and trick people into giving away passwords, approving fraudulent payments, gaining access to something. I mean, the list goes on. The reason this is still number one on the list is because it still works, it's still effective. And artificial intelligence has supercharged these attacks. I mean, we don't get the grammatically imperfect emails anymore. We're getting the grammatically perfect ones, the ones that are hard to spot, right? The impossible ones to see with the naked eye. Second of this is ransomware and double extortion. It's that hostage takeover and taker, right? Ransomware is no longer just about locking your files and just simply doing that. Today's criminals, they actually steal your data first, then they encrypt your systems, and then they threaten to leak your data publicly or sell your data publicly if you don't pay. That's where that double extortion comes into play. So not only do they lock up your data, but they've actually stolen it and are threatening to disclose it, sell it, leak it, whatever. Even if you restore from backup, you know, the damage is already done, right? And that's financial blackmail at a global scale. So insider threats, it's the enemy within. Not all threats come from the outside. Employees, whether they're malicious or whether they're just careless, they can accidentally cause a breach. Click a dangerous link, you know, intentionally cause issues, whatever. So it's the accidents and it's the malicious stuff from an insider standpoint that we also have to be concerned with. You know, and just at the end of the day, having the right procedures in place to protect our organizations from these insider threats is essential. Third-party cloud and supply chain risk. This is, I'll call it kind of the backdoor attack, if you will. You know, even if your defenses are strong, your vendors and cloud providers, they might be the weakest link. Many modern attacks today, they target a third-party system because they know if those third-party systems can be compromised, then they can gain access to you or in so many other organizations that use that third party. This is exactly where, you know, some of the biggest breaches in history have started, whether if any of you are familiar with the SolarWinds attack recently, way back in the day, 10 plus years ago, that's how Target initially got compromised, was through, I think, an HVAC vendor or something like that. Equifax, I'll throw that one out there. There's a number of different attacks that have come through those third-party risk and third-party threats. And then legacy systems. Unpatched zombie infrastructure, old servers, outdated software, unsupported systems. They're like unlocked doors in our network. Attackers know these systems are full of vulnerabilities that may never be fixed or may take a while to fix. And if they're still connected to our environments, I mean, they become an easy entry point for the attackers. So in summary, going to the next slide, I mean, these threats may look different. Some are loud like ransomware, others are silent like insider risks and supply chain breaches, but they all target one thing, and they target our ability to operate. But the good news, the protections needed to stop them are well known, and that's exactly what we're going to cover here in the following slides. Next slide, please.
Hey, Travis, which of those items do you think you hear the most from our clients and from our speaking engagements that people are experiencing?
I think it's those top two that I covered. Number one is the social engineering aspect, and I think that's just, again, where, you know, trying to trick the human, trying to hack the human and hack the person. I share that one a lot and hear a lot about that one, just making sure that people are focused on training people on how to react to the social engineering tactics that are out there. And then to go along with it is just ransomware, right? People are nervous, just like we saw in that poll, Jeff, people are nervous about ransomware and the impact that could have on operations and reputation and those sorts of things.
Right, yeah, I'd agree. Thanks for that. So I think it's my turn to jump in. Appreciate everybody joining us today. We're going to talk now a little bit about how to ward off some of those, what we're calling for October here, cyber goblins, and banish some of those security ghosts. So we're going to walk you through a couple of examples here that we see, not on a everyday basis, but a pretty regular basis. And we're going to start here with a business email compromise. So business email compromise is basically when an attacker focuses the attack on gaining some type of leverage or access to your email system to take some type of malicious action. The example that we're going to go through here today ended up with a ACH compromise, which we'll talk about at the end. So I'm going to build this out here a little bit. So the first thing that an attacker will start with is a phishing attempt that Travis has mentioned a couple of times here. And it used to be, like Travis mentioned, that you could tell that this was an attack or an attempted attack because the grammar was really poor, or they weren't using the same logos of the companies that they were trying to pretend to be. Nowadays with AI, it's very polished and it's very easy for a user to succumb to a phishing attack because it does really look like a Microsoft sign-in in this example, right, where they're being asked to click on a link, enter in their information, which then gives them access to a user's mailbox. In this specific case, not only did they just put in their user credentials, but they also had multi-factor authentication enabled, and the attacker was able to perform a token sealing operation, which basically means you log in with your browser into your email client. In that session, you've already got a stored cookie that allowed you to bypass MFA because you had previously authenticated, and that attacker can steal that information and then use that to access your mailbox, even if you have multi-factor authentication enabled. The next thing an attacker will do once they have access to somebody's email is start to create some rules behind the scenes that will mask their identity or mask their activity in the mailbox. In most situations, what they do is they create folders that are buried way deep in somebody's email or inbox structure that are hidden, and they start building rules that redirect inbound and outbound email into these deeply buried folders to try and mask what they're doing. One specific situation, somebody got into a senior accounting representative was able to start communicating with their clients and burying that communication in that folder structure, and actually got their clients then to change ACH information so that when they submitted a payment for an invoice, that payment was going to an offshore account somewhere. To the tune of a couple $100,000 in payments going out somewhere that shouldn't have gone to. So all these things can be preventable with some pretty basic things in an email system. The first one is you want to make sure you have proper email security setup. And these are records out on the internet that tell mail systems that are communicating back and forth if the emails that are being sent and received are coming from the actual person that is sending the emails. So they're called DKIM or DKIM, SPF, and DMARC. And you want to make sure that you talk with your IT team to make sure these are properly set up and tested. That'll help prevent some phishing emails from coming into your environment and authenticate your emails going out saying that you are actually sending those emails. The other thing to do is have some email security in place, advanced threat protection, and both Google and Microsoft and third parties like Mimecast and Proofpoint have solutions that will replace links and in emails with a link that you click on that scans the destination to make sure you're going to a valid destination website instead of a no malicious website. A lot of times it's called link rewriting or URL rewriting. You also want to have security in place that has attachment protection, where it'll actually open the attachment in the cloud, verify that it's not going or it's not opening any links or any websites that might be malicious. And I think the most important piece in all this is end user security awareness training. The one, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think it was like 95% of attacks are due to human error. Training your users is probably the most important thing that you can do to help prevent that human error. And so you want to get an end user security awareness program in place. You're going to see that one pop up in 2 or 3 of these steps because it could have prevented a couple of these different things taking place. The next step, some protections against the next step, is to make sure that you have licensing in Microsoft or Google that helps prevent that token hijacking that I talked about. Specifically in Microsoft, it's called Entra P2 or Premium 2 licensing. And Google, it's actually part of their base licensing, but it's in beta right now. And you want to enable that functionality that prevents session stealing or token hijacking, or what that's called. Again, end user security awareness training would have helped prevent this stage of the attack as well, because the training that people go through, especially with solutions from KnowBe4 or Proofpoint or Mimecast, really help people be able to determine the websites that they're going to, whether or not they're actual websites, and what to do and when, I guess I should say, what not to do on those websites, right? Not putting your username and password into websites from links and those types of things. So again, that training of your end user is very important. Lastly, this step is alerting that you can configure within your email system that looks at risky user logins and abnormal behavior. So things like, hey, you're already logged into your email account, but now somebody tried to log in across the country or out of the country as well. It'll alert on those things and tell you and your IT team that, hey, somebody might be logging into your account that shouldn't be. Okay, so there's some basic protections for that step of the attack. The next thing you want to have in place is something to be able to determine whether or not email rules are being created, and if they are, alerting you or your IT team that those rules have been created. This is an important step because it allows you to start getting in front of an attacker, right? The earlier you know something is taking place, the better off you're going to be. So these alerts are standard alerts that you can configure or have your IT team configure in both Microsoft and Google platforms. And they will tell you when somebody creates a mail flow rule or a mailbox rule that diverts email to a different destination. And the next important step here, or protection here, is having some type of plan in place that you can follow when you start to see some of these things happen, right? I talk to clients a lot about not having to run around with your hair on fire in these situations. You want to understand what your steps are going to be to start responding to something taking place. And so having that incident response plan in place will allow you to go through this process more calmly and without some of the chaos involved, without having that plan in place. Okay. And then lastly, specifically to this business email compromise, is having some type of documented ACH change rules in place, right? Like, informing your client you're never going to request an ACH change by email, right? That's going to have some other method of communication. Or if the business email compromise involves something else like, them impersonating a executive in your business and asking somebody to perform a task like wire money somewhere else, having a multi-step process in place where you detailed out, hey, if I'm going to request a wire transfer, it's going to be done by voice, it's going to be done by some other method outside of email, and you've set up something with your bank, and I think all banks nowadays have some type of multi-step process you can enroll in for wire transfers and transfers of money to help prevent these types of situations. So looking at how you can prevent some of these things at the end and having something documented there is important as well. Okay, next attack I want to run through real quick here is a data exfiltration and ransomware attack. So step one is gonna take place with an attacker using some type of remote connection with compromised credentials. A lot of times those compromised credentials come from a phishing attack through a business email compromise, right? They're going to use that to remote onto your network. They're then going to look to compromise administrative accounts and vulnerabilities in your environment. So, if you have administrative accounts that haven't had their passwords reset or use easy passwords, or one of the things that we see quite often is a standard user account also having administrative rights, meaning the user account that you use every day to access email and those types of things. If you have that set up with an admin right as well, that gives an attacker the opportunity to use that account to access your network and then have administrative rights. Okay. Next step is they're going to spend time investigating your environment, and they're going to use the vulnerabilities to spread across your environment. We see attackers that are in place for a day or two, all the way up to multiple weeks in your environment as they investigate your network, try to find ways into all the systems, look for your confidential information before they start executing their attack. Next step, they're going to exfiltrate any private information that they can find. They want to have basically a double ransom, right? They want to be able to say, hey, we've got your data. If you don't pay us, we're going to release it. And then the last step is they're going to execute an encryption or ransomware software on your network that's going to encrypt as much data as possible to prevent you from operating your business. Okay. Some steps here to prevent this pretty quickly. First step is internet security, or the first group is internet security. So building that out, having an enterprise or business class firewall, you want to have that in place. And Caitlin, yeah, thank you. You want to have MFA on your VPN and remote access. So just like your email or your bank accounts, if you are accessing your network remotely, you want to have a prompt on your phone that allows you to confirm that you're actually logging into your network. And then you want to have 24/7 monitoring of connections and file transfers in and out of your network. User security, that security training and testing that we've talked about, you want to have that in place. You also want to have your IT team audit accounts and permissions on a regular basis. So at least annually, if not biannually, you want to be looking at your accounts and the permissions that they have access to. You also want to remove any local and domain admin rights from your end user account. So any account that you're using to access email and files on a day-to-day basis should not have local rights on your computer that are administrative rights, or rights to your network that are administrative rights. And lastly, you want to limit the quantity of administrative accounts you have on your network. The next group of protections is endpoint security. So this is basically having antivirus, or what we're calling next generation endpoint detection and response on every device in your network. You want to be looking for vulnerabilities in your environment, having your IT team use a software to scan for new vulnerabilities on a regular basis and remediate those. You want to log and monitor the security events taking place on your computers 24/7. And then you want to patch your operating systems and applications on a regular basis, at least monthly. And lastly, goes back to that, hey, let's not be running around with our hair on fire as we're trying to fight to gain control of our environment again if this happens, right? We want to have disaster planning in place. That includes a number of things: regular backups with off-site storage. That's very important to have that off-site storage, and to make sure that you're testing those backups annually at minimum. We see a lot of people that think, hey, my backups are telling me they're good. I'm getting a report every day that my backups are successful, but they haven't tested them for a number of years, maybe sometimes, and they go to use those backups and can't for some reason. So it's very important to test those restores. Lastly is having an incident response plan, which tells you what actions you're going to take in the event of some type of an attack. And then a disaster recovery plan, which is a little bit different, which is having a documented process to recover in the event of this, right? So if I have to restore data, how am I going to go about that? How am I going to get that restored in a timely manner? So there's a lot there. Don't worry, we're going to talk about something we're going to give you as a handout here at the end to help you evaluate where you're at with those, but those are the protections we see as important to help prevent those types of attacks.
Jeff, thank you. And you said it a few times, I'm going to mention it again. It is so important to train the human firewall. They could either be your weakest or your strongest link.
Yep.
Or strongest link, excuse me. So our second poll question, will you survive the night? Now, a little setup here though. Through the lens of those old cheesy horror movies, how protected is your business from a cyber standpoint? Are you not protected like the girl in those movies that's just standing alone in a field hoping something bad doesn't happen? Are you a little protected? At least you're in the garage with sharp garden and lawn tools. A little more protected, you're in the basement, but the door is locked. Or are you fully protected where you're armed to the teeth and ready to take on anything that comes your way? We'll take a minute to go ahead and enter your selection, and we'll see what the results say. curious. All right, you have a locked door. That's better than nothing, right?
Great. Well, I'm encouraged to see the 15% there at the bottom as well, right? See if
Yeah.
15% of the people feel that they're in a good spot. That's great.
Next code for CPE is 907.
All right, so let's talk about the compliance topic here. And one thing we wanted to cover in this presentation is, compliance related cybersecurity matters, since this likely, pertains and relates to many of you on the call today in many just forms and facets. But, compliance, again, it doesn't have to be scary or terrifying. And if we go to the next slide, there's a word cloud that I wanted to just show. I mean, this probably could make some of us feel a little overwhelmed, but that's exactly the point. This is what kind of compliance may look like for some of you and in our organizations. Maybe an endless swarm of regulations, of policies, of standards, of laws, of reporting requirements, frameworks, acronyms, whatever, all the legal jargon that's flying around from every direction. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel scary, but it's not because compliance is meant to be scary, but it's because it can be confusing and it's constantly changing. Oftentimes this stuff is written in legal language instead of, business language that we can all relate to. But here's the truth, most of these terms, they're just different ways of saying the same thing. Protect the data, number one, protect the customer, the client, or whoever, and then prove you're doing it. That's essentially what all this is about. Protect the data, protect the customer, the client, whoever, and prove that you're doing it. Now, compliance isn't about just checking boxes. It's about demonstrating that you've got reasonable security in place. And I want to talk through just real briefly, just as we click through here. I mean, depending on your industry, you may be dealing with one or more of these frameworks, whether it's, CMMC for defense suppliers, or, and Kaylin, you might need to click and build this out. CMMC for defense suppliers, or SOC for service organizations and SaaS providers, or HIPAA or PCI, FTC rules, the new, Ohio House Bill 96 with Ohio's new cyber law. Here's the key message. These frameworks are built on a similar foundation, and you don't need different cybersecurity programs for each one. You just need one strong program that maps to all of them. So rather than being haunted by compliance, if you are, let's turn it into something that actually works in your favor, protecting your business while also, reducing some of this risk around the compliance and regulatory side of things. Now, at least a passion area for me that I want to move into next is I want to talk about what protecting your business looks like. So just like I mentioned on this compliance topic, how do we do this? How do we actually protect our business? And I want to use like an analogy here around a web of protection. Jeff hit on a lot of these items in his what he was just talking about. Some of it's going to be repetitive, but I want to expand a little bit more on that like total ecosystem approach to cybersecurity. So as I mentioned in our introduction, this is where I'm revealing the cheat code, defense in depth. We'll walk through how organizations build layered information security across network, identity, endpoint, and data to truly protect themselves as they grow. And I'm calling it a web of protection. It's that layered, interconnected security model designed to protect our organizations on every angle. I can tell you there isn't one single control that's going to stop every threat. Just like Jeff mentioned, right, there are several layers built in here. There's not one single thing that's going to prevent everything. But when you layer all these things together, you actually build pretty solid resilience. Even if one layer is breached, the other layers are in there to help prevent the incident from becoming that disaster situation. So as I walk through this web, I want you to visualize this web of protection as like a medieval castle. So picture in your mind a medieval castle, and bear with me as I walk through this. And think of that medieval castle and all the protections that are in place for that castle. Now, the other thing too is, bear with me on this slide. What you're seeing on this slide as we build this out is my chicken scratch handwriting, where I've basically dumped what's in my head into a PowerPoint slide, mainly because I didn't want to spend the time to, find a bunch of images and icons and things like that. Believe it or not, I used to win handwriting awards back in school. I'm not sure I'd do that today, but anyway. All right, so information security. It's called information security for a reason, right? We're here to protect information. The first element is, Jeff mentioned this, identity and access security. This is like the castle. So again, picture that medieval castle. This is like the castle gatekeeper or the royal seals, right? That you might see on a scroll or something like that. Not everyone gets into the castle. You have guards checking identity documents and seals before allowing entry. Only certain people may enter restricted areas, just like access control and multi-factor authentication and technology. Only certain people can enter. Everything starts with identity. We have to verify who is accessing our systems and what they're allowed to do. This layer of defense, it includes, like I said, multi-factor authentication, strong passwords, single sign-on, enforcing least privilege access. And I'll leave you with this. If you control identity and if you control access, you shut down a huge portion of the attacks before they even start. So that's why this one is number one on the list. Network security, castle walls, drawbridges, moats. These are the outer defenses of your castle. The moat deters easy access. The walls block intruders, right? The drawbridge controls and funnels entry and exit out of the castle. It's just like firewalls and network segmentation as they function. Keeps attackers out and it controls the traffic from in and outside of our organizations. Firewalls, VPNs, network structure, all that stuff, they act as that gatekeeper. And network security is really, it creates that perimeter and those internal boundaries that make it difficult for attackers to, number one, to get in, and number two, to move around once they get in. Endpoint security, those are like the archers and the guards, right, up there on the castle walls, right? Each castle archer represents someone spotting potential attacks or invaders. And if an invader slips past the walls, these archers and these guards, they're the endpoint protection, right? They are there to detect those intruders and stop them from moving deeper into the castle. So every laptop, every server, any other device it's a potential entry point. And endpoint protection and these modern tools that are out there from a security standpoint, like you may have heard tools, the buzzwords around EDR and XDR, those solutions, they give you visibility and the ability to isolate compromised devices before the threat spreads or has the ability to further impact the castle. Data security, the most valuable assets, the gold, the jewels, the royal documents inside the castle, they're stored in a secure vault right at the heart of the castle. Only trusted individuals have the key to get to that inner vault. That's where encryption, that's where access control, that's where data loss prevention comes into play, right? Is around that data security. Data and disruption it's where attackers, that's where what they're after. Data and disruption, that's what they're after. We can protect the data through encryption, like I said, access control, data loss prevention, backups, and retention policies. Jeff mentioned a lot of these in what he was just going through. Even if someone gains access, they shouldn't be able to use or exfiltrate the data or disrupt operations. Application security. So I kind of relate this to like your castle windows and escape tunnels or other ways in, right? So think about it like castle architects, they have to ensure there aren't any weak entry points into the castle. There aren't any broken doors, there's not any unguarded windows. And misconfigured or insecure software and applications that we use in our environments today, they can be a weak point. And application security, it's all about reinforcing, all those openings, all those possible openings, so attackers can't exploit those design flaws. Applications, the way we do business, right? They are also a target. All the software that we use, it's a target. We can make sure they're secured right through secure coding practices. Jeff mentioned patching, very important, web application firewalls, integration protection. They block vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. Physical security, that's what castles were all about, right? You got the castle guards, you got towers, you got secure chambers, all that stuff. So in a medieval castle, it was everything. got guards outside the gates, guards at the gates, guards inside the gates, locked doors, locked windows, all that stuff, right? Secured armories, ensure the physical protection of the infrastructure. So equate that to badge systems and surveillance systems and locked server rooms and visitor management and those sorts of things. Those are all essential layers in our digital world. Disaster recovery, emergency tunnels, and hidden areas, right? If the castle is under siege or breached, the royal family, they have to retreat somewhere to a secure place or use escape tunnels. So that's what disaster recovery plans are there to ensure, that even if our systems and our technology is attacked, the kingdom, our organization, can survive and rebuild. So we talk about, the backups, the failover systems, disaster recovery procedures and plans, all of that. And then security governance. So basically, this is the king's laws and his council. The castle doesn't function by chance. It operates under laws and rules and oversight from advisors. And this is where governance really comes in, right? Provides that strategy, that accountability, that enforcement, just like cybersecurity policies and frameworks today. It's what ties it all together. It ensures that policies, roles, responsibilities, and accountability are in place. Governance sets the standards, measures progress, and ensures that security isn't optional. It's built into how the organization operates. I've talked a little bit already about third-party and cloud security, but those are like your allied kingdoms and your merchants with access to the castle. So these allies and these trade partners, they may enter the castle, but they have to be trusted and verified, right? If a merchant is compromised, they could smuggle threats into the court. Steve mentioned this, I think, but you are only as strong as your weakest link, and third-party and vendor security ensures that your allies don't become your attacker's doorway. And today, our data, our operations, they extend far beyond our four walls, right? Many of us, not many of us, all of us are using vendors, cloud systems, and software, different providers in different areas of our technology, but they're part of our attack surface. We have to assess their security, got to manage their access, and ensure that the same standards we apply internally also apply to them. And then security monitoring and incident response. This is where incident response and vulnerability management and watching things all the time comes into play. And I'll equate this to our watchtowers and our alarm bells on the castle. So the watchtower guards, they scan the horizon 24/7. If they see incoming threats, they ring the alarm, they blow the trumpet, right? The archers take their position and defenders respond. That's real-time threat monitoring and incident response in action. Now, this web is really only as effective if we're watching it, right? Continuous monitoring, continuous logging, threat detection, incident response plans, disaster recovery plans, those all allow us to detect and contain threats in real time before they turn into those, business disruptions that we've talked about. I'll leave you with this on this, but when these layers work together, you don't just have security controls, you actually have this living, breathing, adaptive system of protection. This is how modern organizations stay resilient, is when they apply these principles. They're scalable too, or they should be scalable, and they should remain secure in an ever-changing threat landscape. So just like a castle is, it isn't just protected by just a moat or just one guard. Our organizations aren't protected by just one control. True security comes from these layers of defense all working together, preventing, detecting, and responding to all these threats at different levels and at every level. So I'm going to hand it back over to Jeff, I believe. Oh, we're going to our third poll.
I'm going to hop in there, Travis. I appreciate the castle analogy. I think it gives us all a clear image, those of us that are not in IT. And we'll stick with that analogy for our final poll question. So what actions will you take to ward off the goblins? You're going to leave the doors and windows unlocked and just hope everything's all right? Option 2, maybe you lock the doors, keep the windows open, it's warm out. Option 3, lock the doors and the windows. Or option 4, lock the doors, windows, and monitor the premises. I will say at Rea Information Services, we are all about option 4, locking the doors and the windows and keeping an eye on things. 24/7, because when it comes to cyber goblins, it's not enough to just secure your environment. You've got to monitor it too. Let's go ahead and take a look at those results.
Great.
That is awesome to see. I think all of the constant education from all of the IT providers is starting to take hold, and that's great to see, especially in the SMB world where they don't have unlimited budgets or large IT teams.
I think that's the last code, if I'm not mistaken, right, Steve? 675 for those that need CPE.
This is our last code. The code words are not appearing to work, so anyone on the call, just comment CPE under the question box that pops up, and we will get you your credit.
All right, so we've talked a lot about, things that happen or things that go bump in the night as part of this process, right? Some of those things that we see out in the industries that we work with. And we wanted to give you guys, something that you can walk away with here, and some things you can take action to help you protect against those things. And we wanted to be more, like I think Travis said earlier, a little bit more strategic and not tell you just to go out and install a new antivirus on your computers, right? So we're going to talk about some things you can walk away with and take some actions on here after the webinar. Let's go ahead and move that one forward. There we go. So I think the first and foremost, and from that last poll, 90% of you decided that you're going to take cybersecurity and make it, or understand that it's critical to your success in your organizations. I did see that we had a few people that said, they were going to leave the windows and doors unlocked, and I'm wondering if those are the gestures from that court that are just joking around with us there. Utilize a provided checklist to determine where your gaps are. So the second document in the handout is a cybersecurity protection checklist. And we wanted you to be able to have something, like I said, you could walk away with and help you kind of understand where you're at. So if you open that, I don't know that we have enough time to really open it up and go through it, but it's based upon those different webs of protection that Travis was talking about, right? So there's 4 or 5 questions in each one of the sections that's going to help you understand whether or not you're sufficiently protected. My recommendation would be to take this and sit down with your internal or external IT teams and answer the questions. And if you have any that you walk away with, and thanks, Kaylin, for pulling that open, where you've answered no, those are things that you should identify as gaps, and you should start making plans to address those things. We are all about locking the doors, windows, and monitoring everything, but we also know that this is not a 24-hour thing that you can get in place, right? You need to plan this, you need to budget for this, and this tool will help you identify those gaps and allow you to get those gaps addressed in a way and time frame that makes sense for your organization, right? So the third step there is to make a plan from those identified gaps on how you're going to address those, how and if you're going to address those, and when. And then you want to perform an annual checkup or risk assessment and basically walk back through those things again annually. And if you feel, especially if you're under some type of compliance requirement, you're already probably doing these annual checkups or risk assessments, and they might be more in depth. But this really helps you with that continual improvement process, right? To make sure that you're continuing to look at these issues and understanding where you're at, right? And lastly there, require transparency and regular communication from your IT team. Without transparency as a business owner or as an executive, it's very hard to know whether or not your IT team, internal or external, are doing what they need to do to protect your business and help you be successful. So having regular check-ins, having proof that these things are in place and working should be a requirement for that relationship that you build, whether, like I said, it's internal or external. You want to make sure that your vendors and your internal team are doing their part to make sure that you're protected. If you do those 5 things and use those as kind of the overall strategy on how you're going to try and address some of these cybersecurity needs, it will help you walk through the process in a way that doesn't seem too overwhelming. As always, if you have questions or needs for us, we're happy to have conversations and assist you in any way that we can as well. So then we're going to open it up for any questions. Looks like we have about 6 minutes left here. So now's the time to throw some questions out there for us, and we'd be happy to answer them.
Again, it does look like a lot of questions were around CPE. Please just open up that session and type in CPE in the questions, and we can see who was on today's call. We will ensure you guys get that credit hour.
All right. No other questions? We just want to wish you maybe a happy Halloween. Thank you for joining us in our webinar today. Really appreciate the time you spent with us. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow up with one of us three. We'd be happy to talk to you.
Maybe one question did just come in.
Great.
If an organization doesn't have a full IT or security team, what's the best place to start to improve cybersecurity without being overwhelmed? You know, I would probably answer that. You guys can weigh in too, but look at, you know, what's going to give you the highest impact with the lowest level of effort first. Something easy is multi-factor authentication, right? That helps tremendously. Strong authentication, like I talked about with the identity and access, and then training end users, right? Because if they are still, you know, one of the most susceptible out there, then training them and making sure they know how to detect things, where to report things, and if they, you know, see something, say something mentality. I think those are good first steps. Then I'd be remiss if I didn't say, like, making sure you've got good backups and a plan in place to respond if something bad happens. You have to have something to go back to.
Yeah, I was gonna, you know, those three things are going to be the key ones. If you don't have somebody to work with, it's make sure you've got a good, you know, password process in place with multi-factor authentication to access your network or any cloud service provider that hosts sensitive data that you might need. And then Travis, you know, as you were talking through there, it was disaster recovery is key, right? Making sure you've got your data backed up. You need a fallback position if something does happen. And so, you know, those three that Travis brought up, but, you know, those two for me specifically, if you don't have somebody to work with, is where I would focus on to start with.
Sure, if there's any more out there or not, I don't think so. Maybe one more. Looks like we got 3 minutes left. We could take this next one. So I think I was the one that mentioned the opportunistic nature of attacks today, right? So what are the simplest steps we can take to avoid being, you know, an easy target? I would say, you know, it kind of relates back to that first question, and the answer there is, you know, make sure those identities the user accounts are properly protected. I will say, you know, attackers, they're not looking for companies that have Fort Knox controls around them. That's what the opportunistic nature, that's where that comes into play. They're looking for the low-hanging fruit. So if they can compromise an account easily, well, then it's game over. It's right. They've accomplished their mission. So I think doing that, again, protecting that account is critical. Cleaning up accounts and keeping an eye on accounts is critical. I would also just throw in there, just, you know, making sure you've got a patching and good vulnerability management, identifying those low-hanging fruit vulnerabilities that might be out there. That's another good one to focus on. And there's a lot more around identity and access, right? I think, Jeff, you mentioned even like what we call conditional access policies, right? Where you block, you know, sign-in attempts from outside the US as an example, or something like that. Those are low-hanging fruit items that you could easily take advantage of. Again, it depends on your licensing level that you might have, but something to consider.
Yeah. looks like we've got, can you say a little bit about the Ohio law? I think they're referring to the new House bill, Travis.
Sure.
And that applies to government entities or any entities that get funds from the state of Ohio. It basically is a regulation that sets forth a number of things that organizations should be doing and will need to do to pass the audit, which is in House Bill 96. So if you're not a government entity or you're not getting funds from the state of Ohio, likely something you don't have to worry about. If you are, we're happy to give you some more details about that in a follow-up conversation at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jeff.
Let's see.
Jeff, just to be mindful, we are at 1 p.m. We can,
Yep.
so there are other questions that we did not get to. We'll follow up with an email to answer those questions. I think is how it works. Kate, if you want to close us out here.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you, Steve, Travis, Jeff, all for sharing some of that wisdom today. And hopefully it wasn't too spooky for our listeners. But if you are afraid, we do have some seasoned battlers here. So their information will be available also in the email you will get again on Wednesday with the slides, the handout they were referencing. We will work to answer any questions that were still outstanding. And again, we will get you that CPE. So thank you guys all and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.